Добрый день, глубоко уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning the panel session for the defense of the thesis by Anton Khoroshavin. The thesis is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of science in economics. The specialization is 080005. The topic of the thesis is new generation of business sustainable development management instruments in their implementation in Russian oil and gas companies. By rector's order, as of the 19th of March 2018, I, Professor Vadimovich, Doctor of Economics, Associate Professor of the Department of Economic Theory and Economic Policy, St. Petersburg State University, was appointed Chair of the Dissertation Board. Allow me to introduce my colleagues to you. So the members of the Dissertation Board are Natalia Golubetskaya, Doctor of Economics, Professor of the Department of Management and Planning of Socioeconomic Processes, St. Petersburg State University. Margarita Zamyatina, Doctor of Economics, Chief Researcher at the Institute of Regional Problems Economy of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Igor Sergeyev, Vice Rector for Research, St. Petersburg Mining University, Doctor of Economics. And Sergei Lukin, Doctor of Economics, Associate Professor, Belarusian State University, who has joined us remotely via Skype. Under the federal law as of the 23rd of May 2016 on amending Article 4 of the Federal Law on Science and State Scientific and Technical Policy, St. Petersburg State University is entitled to confer academic degrees. The corresponding order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University was issued on the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1. According to item 17 of section 3 of the regulation on the Dissertation Board, in St. Petersburg State University, the panel discussion is valid, providing 2/3 of the appointed board members are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 5 people. The Dissertation Board consists of 5 people, 5 of which are present, including 1 board member who is attending the defense remotely via Skype. Therefore, we have a quorum. The panel discussion cannot exceed 2 hours. Let me announce the agenda. Number 1, the chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the candidate for the degree and their conformity to the requirements. Chairman's reply to questions, if any, 5 minutes. 2, the candidate's presentation, providing an overview and findings of the research, no more than 15 minutes. Question to the candidate regarding the presentation, no more than 2 minutes for each question. The candidate's reply to the questions. 4, Chair's overview of the submitted reports on the thesis. As all the reports were posted on the official SPB website, only critical remarks and questions are read out. 5, reports on the thesis. No more than 10 minutes. Reports by members of the board are requested to provide critical remarks and questions. Number 6, the candidate's comments about the reports on the thesis, no more than 15 minutes. 7, questions from the audience. The floor will be given to the non-board attendees. They can give a brief account of their ideas or ask questions to the candidate about the research, no more than 5 minutes per person. If there are any people willing to ask questions from the audience, it is necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name before the talk. Number 8, the candidate's comments about the talks given by non-members of the board, no more than 5 minutes. 9, presentation of the candidate's thesis supervisor, no more than 3 minutes. 10, 5-minute break before the opening balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results of the defense is not broadcast. 11, open balloting, vote counting and recording the results in the minutes of the session. 12, deciding upon conferring or not conferring the academic degree. 13, candidate's closing speech, no more than 2 minutes. Before we proceed with the agenda, I kindly ask you to switch off your mobile phones. The panel session of the Dissertation Board is being recorded and broadcast on the internet and interpreted into English. Let me start with the first item of the agenda. I'll start with the first report of the chair. Thesis by Anton Khoroshavin was submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of science in economics. The specialization is 080005, Economics and Management of the National Economy, Economy, Organization and Management of Enterprises, Sectors, Complexes. The thesis was approved for defense by the order of the SPBU Academic Secretary number 9174/1 as of the 16th of November 2016. The Dissertation Board was set up by the order of the SPBU Academic Secretary on the 19th of March 2018, and I have already introduced its members. The candidate has submitting the following documents to the SPBU Academic Secretary. An application to Professor Nikolai Kropachev, Rector of SPBU, on the approval of the thesis for defense, submitted on the 20th of February 2018. Reports of the academic supervisor, Professor Pakhomova, Department of Economic Theory, St. Petersburg State University. List of published works containing 18 items, which describe the research findings. 7 works have been published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science. 1 paper was published in the Scopus Indexed Journal. Letter of verification as of the 21st of November 2017, number 04A346, issued by St. Petersburg University and certifying that Anton Khoroshavin was enrolled in a postgraduate course at St. Petersburg State University from the 1st of September 2015 to the 21st of November 2017 and passed 3 qualifying exams in History and Philosophy of Science, Mark 4, Foreign Language, Mark 5, and Economics and Management of the National Economy, Mark 5. Expert statement from St. Petersburg University. On submitting the thesis for defense, approved by Sergei Aplonov, SPBU Vice Rector for Research, submitted on the 14th of February 2018. University Diploma with Honors number 656 from St. Petersburg University, issued on the 19th of June 2006, given the qualification Environmental Manager, specialization Ecology. Thesis in Russian and English, a printed version with the manuscript copyright and the digital copy. The thesis formatting and reference list complies with the state standard R7.0. The above mentioned documents comply with item 12 of section 3 of the Order on Granting Academic Degrees in St. Petersburg State University. Now we're proceeding to item 2 from our agenda.
Dear members of the Dissertation Board, dear colleagues, my thesis is New Generation of Business Sustainable Development Management Instruments and their implementation in Russian oil and gas companies. Professor Pakhomova is my research advisor. Speaking about the relevance of my research, I must say that sustainable development used to encompass the international level. But recently we have begun to understand that It is impossible to achieve UN Sustainable Development goals without involvement business. So, since 2013, General Assemblies have speaking about the importance of sustainable development in business, especially critical role of oil and gas companies, because we have seen very serious environmental problems in this area. The changes in the oil and gas industry, such as changing in the geography, changing in the markets, development of alternative fuels, lead to the understanding of the critical role of sustainable development in business. Sustainable development is critical for Russian Federation because oil and gas industry is critical for the Russian economy. Each company develops its own strategy for sustainable development. We must pay attention to the analysis of issues of sustainable development that oil and gas companies face. We have shown that Russian oil and gas companies act on the market with excessive supply, and the vertical integration is not enough to provide for steady demand for oil. Namely, we have seen the decrease of oil production and very low oil refining ratio. Besides, we see competition from OPEC countries, as well as strict requirements from the EU. By this I mean Euro 6 standard. The barriers for entering the industry lead to ineffective sustainable development. This can be explained by the fact that the state strives to increase oil revenues and not to increase effectivity of oil and gas companies. Speaking about the prior research of the area, I must say that most theoretical works deal with implementation of sustainable development principle at a state level. If we speak about the sustainable development in business, we can say that most articles deal with specific areas such as environmental security, quality management, and the analyzing of new ISO standards. However, the issue of comprehensive implementation of sustainable development principles at a micro level have not been covered to a great extent. So the purpose of the research is to develop a comprehensive approach to the study and to develop instruments for corporate sustainability. Here are the tasks that we have in our research work. They include analysis of literary works, analysis of indicators of sustainable business development, testing of management instruments for sustainable business development in oil and gas companies. The purpose and the tasks of the research work have determined its structure. The structure is quite traditional. The first chapter deals with the analyzing approaches to sustainable development, and the second chapter deals with the testing of these instruments in oil and gas companies. Here are the main research findings. First of all, an integrated and at the same time a differentiated approach to the company development based on the industry characteristic and its economic, environmental and social dimensions. It takes into account current and long-term interests of the company as a link for modern value change for business and society. We regard sustainable development as a long-term strategy which takes into account long-term and short-term company interests. And it uses modern management tools and mechanisms. Number two, the environmental and economic indicators of sustainable development proposed in the work, including environmental and economic indicators, allow us to assess the efficiency of sustainable development strategy in response to challenges, as well as to compare different companies and to identify the leaders in the area. Number 3, the new ISO instruments allow us to change the system and response to changes in the environment, such as strict environmental requirements, innovations of the fourth industrial revolution, and changes in the market. As a result, it leads to the increase of corporate sustainability. Number 4, the integrated approach to management system in oil and gas companies was added by a professional analysis of competitive advantages and disadvantages on the market and by the analysis of major trends in scientific advances. The instruments that we have proposed include such items as audit of the management system, risk management, and management of the product cycle. Here I would like to give some examples. On this slide you can see what we have seen in major oil and gas companies in Russia. This flow chart consists of 3 processes: risk management, legal requirements, and cooperation with stakeholders. Each business process refers to a specific layout. This process allows us to use effective management system of industrial security, and so on. As a result, we have an integrated system of sustainable development business. Here you can see the analysis of using different instruments to analyze risk management. For example, we have developed risk management matrix in the company of Rosneft. The testing that we conducted allowed us to come to the following results. Risk management used by Lukoil is implemented with the help of using specific process and uses a lot of experts to analyze risks. They also analyze risks for different daughter companies. They also assess risks according to 3 scenarios, which allows them to come to more comprehensive results. We analyze risk management in Rosneft company as well. They take into account the worst-case scenario and focus the resources on challenging and on combating key risks. However, this does not allow them to prevent risks at an early stage. In Gazprom company, the process of risk management is still in progress and is still being developed. To analyze the efficiency of oil and gas companies, we have proposed a number of indicators which have been adapted for the Russian oil and gas companies. One of them is supply of hydrocarbons. This allows to show reserve replacement. The testing allowed us to come to the conclusion that 3 major oil and gas companies in Russia and 3 foreign oil and gas companies have the following results. We see a negative dynamics in terms of supply of hydrocarbons. This can be explained by a number of reasons. For example, increase of crude oil production and decrease of different other aspects. For example, the state sometimes strives to increase oil revenues and does not take care of the efficiency of different companies. The next indicator shows us the amount of pollution that is released into the atmosphere. Here we should pay attention to the fact that each company has shown a positive dynamics in this area, which results from strict legal requirements. For example, companies have to pay extra charges if they flare more than 95% of oil dissolved gas. The leader in this indicator is Lukoil, because they are able to conduct risk assessment management and they use oil dissolved gas more efficiently. But other companies were able to implement this program only 2 years later. The third indicator deals with the ratio of polluted areas and the production of hydrocarbons. Here we also see a positive dynamics in terms of Russian oil and gas companies. The analysis allowed oil and gas companies to develop a program that prevents emergencies as well as conduct preventive maintenance. They also take measures. For example, they form task groups in order to provide quick oil spill response. As for the testing of the last indicator, which is the environmental costs, here I must say that we have come to the conclusion that environmental costs should be taken into account in a more detailed form. For example, they should be accounted for separately from capital investment and other lines in the balance sheet. This will allow them to comply with different standards, especially standards of financial statements. In conclusion, I would like to say that we have come to the following results. So there are different approaches to sustainable development in scientific literature, but we have been able to develop our own attitude and our own approach to sustainable development. We have proposed and also tested different indicators and instruments in oil and gas companies of Russia. We have justified the necessity to create institutional conditions to develop business. By this I mean strict regulation in the area, assistance to companies, and providing tools for sustainable development. The major research findings have been published in 18 paperworks. I have one article which is published in a Scopus listed journal. So we have analyzed the methods of sustainable development in business in Russian oil and gas companies. We have analyzed such companies as Lukoil, Gazprom and Inkarus. And international experts have also justified and confirmed the effectiveness of the tools proposed in the research. Thank you. Are there any questions to the candidate for the degree? Please ask your question. I have 3 questions. In your paper, you are dealing with major companies, can we apply your recommendations to smaller companies? And don't you think that the high level of monopoly kills the competition in the oil and gas industry? If you want to answer the question now, please do. Yes, you're right. The use of sustainable development tools for companies with small cap companies will have some specific features, and this topic has to be analyzed as a part of a different research. Therefore, it was not among the tasks of our research, but I believe that this topic is quite relevant and important. As for the monopoly on the market, I can say that the monopoly leads to lots of challenges and problems. For example, even Rosneft has such problems as access to the transport infrastructure. There are also examples which show that major oil and gas companies have their impact on smaller companies and try to fix prices in different areas, which is not good for sustainable development. I have another question. So you connect sustainable development mostly with environmental aspects. But today we have heard a lot about the fact that large oil and gas companies close their projects because of the lack of investment. What should be the major management decisions at a macro level in order to achieve results in this area? And my last question is as follows. What countries should act as models in this area? I mean the macro level area. Thank you for your question. Here I believe I should start with the second question. I think that Saudi Arabia should be a model country for us. The government of this country uses oil revenue to buy assets which can be further used for oil and gas companies and also for developing alternative energy. And this strategy will encourage sustainable development in the future. I believe this is one of possible options that will allow us to provide for economic stability in this area. I believe that we should have resorted to the same measures. For example, Lukoil tries to enter the European market. So this is how I can answer your question. Are there any other questions to the candidate? I also have 3 questions. You speak about vertical integration of oil and gas companies. Is anything happening in the process itself? Has anything changed in this area over the last decade? Do we see any new approach to constructing vertical integration, or is it similar to what we had in 1970s? In my opinion, oil and gas sector has recently seen the development of such areas as access to new markets. They also try to enter the markets of alternative energy. The second issue that is happening here is as follows. We see an upstream vertical integration. We see the acquisition of service companies, which is different from what we used to have. Yes, I agree with your answer. My second question is as follows. How do you think we should provide oil and gas companies with resources that will provide for sustainable development and steady economic development? All oil reserves differ from country to country. For example, oil reserves are different in Saudi Arabia and in Canada. Did you take into account the oil reserves? Yes, the oil reserves in Russia are different and they have different types of hydrocarbons. Here we should take into account both oil reserves and the transportation aspect. And the oil itself is similar to Urals oil. And here we have seen lots of ineffective decisions. For example, transporting oil through ineffective pipelines. It's a great risk and challenge, and it leads to losses in the national economy. And my last question is as follows. You spoke about oil dissolved gas. We see that we have been burning less and less oil dissolved gas, and this is a positive dynamics. But if we speak about Eastern Siberia, the situation is different. How can we use oil dissolved gas in such remote areas and with little environmental impact? If we speak about such remote areas, I can say that oil and gas companies use oil dissolved gas in order to provide heat and energy. Maybe it's not the most effective decision, but it's quite a relevant issue, and I think we need specific research in this area. We shouldn't forget that the transportation infrastructure is not developed in this area. However, we can see that Sibur company recently has developed a project in this area, and this is a positive development. Thank you. Are there any other questions? I have two questions. You have given us a flowchart. You have proposed a flowchart for sustainable business development. What conditions, or I would rather say, to what extent the companies are ready to follow this program? This program has been tested, and I believe that the companies are ready to implement this program, but they yield different results. And as we have seen, the indicators were different. The reasons for that are quite various. One of them being is that companies with state participation use a different model in business. They pay more attention to export duties and to oil revenues. But Lukoil company focuses more on long-term development of its business operations. And this is the key aspect that should be taken into account here. My next question is as follows. On one of the first slides, you showed us green requirements to the market. Do you think that these green requirements can be applied to the Russian market? I think these trends have become obvious recently. We see the transfer to more environment-friendly types of fuel. But we shouldn't forget about the market aspect here. For example, some market players try to follow these green requirements. Do you have any questions? Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. My question is as follows. In your research, did you come across any data that allow us to speak about the reaction of foreign consumers to the actions taken by Russian oil and gas companies? I haven't come across any such data because I didn't plan to study the marketing aspect. But the reports that I have studied and the comparative analysis that I have conducted allow me to say that Russian oil and gas companies act rather formally, and this is explained by different requirements. I cannot say that they target market participants in their activities. Thank you for your answer. I also have one question to the candidate. You spoke about proactive risk management system, risk assessment systems. What do you mean by that? By this I mean risk assessment that is conducted before taking any management or technical decision. And here I also speak about risk assessment, which involves different scenarios in order to mitigate risks in the area. I understand everything but for the term proactive. Why do you describe it as proactive system? This risk assessment system is quite clear, but why do you call it proactive? I spoke with top management of Russian oil and gas companies, and I can say that they analyze risks only after something has happened. For example, the Gazprom company has commented on different risks that would not have an impact on their business operations or oil prices, but the scenario turned out to be different. Now we can proceed with our agenda. We have received reports from 5 members of the Dissertation Board. They were duly posted on the website according to Section 9, according to Section 19 of the appropriate order. We have not received any external reports on the thesis. So we can proceed with our agenda. Since all the reports were duly posted on the website, I'll speak about only the critical remarks.
So in my report, I underline the relevance that this research obviously has. At the same time, I have some critical remark. First off, the concept of corporate responsibility is found in numerous concepts of strategic management, which the candidate consistently ignores. For example, she mentions these issues of strategy in the aims and objectives of his research. The same holds true for the instruments of strategic analysis. However, out of the whole range of methods, the candidate uses only one, SWOT analysis in particular. The candidate's devotion to the tools of the design school cannot be explained, and it impoverishes the conclusions. Secondly, when analyzing corporate sustainability and competitiveness of oil and gas sector, the candidate restrains from analyzing market conditions, which complicates market analysis and development prospects of oil and gas companies in Russia. At the same time, with marketing analysis, he often mentioned that on different pages, but he limits himself to these references only. Thirdly, the candidate consistently ignores mathematical and economic and mathematical methods of analysis and research, even when he is analyzing instruments of risk-oriented approach to management, where it's hardly possible to discard these methods. However, the candidate was brilliant at completing this task. Fourthly, and it's an advantage of the research, is the use of statistical materials and corporate reports, which makes the conclusions more valid and trustworthy. However, the candidate limits his study only to study of sustainable development in oil and gas industry to the analysis of environmental and economic indicators of 3 major Russian and 3 major international oil and gas companies, and limits that to the time span from the 2010 to 2015. The fifth, there are some typos and inaccuracies in the text of the dissertation, which hampers perception. However, my general view on the dissertation and its evaluation is positive, and I believe that the dissertation is in conformity with all the requirements for the academic degree, and he can be conferred the academic degree. Let us move on with other reports. The floor goes to Natalia Petrovna Golubetskaya.
I'm going to be brief, since the report is posted on the website. The topic of the research is relevant. The research findings are valid and have credibility. It also has a research novelty, and the candidate for the degree has spoken about these issues. Now I would like to ask some questions. I must say that I assess highly the thesis, however, I have some critical remarks. So the candidate for the degree is analyzing statistical indicators and financial statements for vertically integrated oil and gas companies, but I think it would be more interesting to analyze these indicators for small companies. The terms sustainable business development and corporate sustainability, which are used in the term, do not seem quite appropriate due to current legislation. Number 3. I think the candidate for the degree should have drafted detailed proposals on implementing measures in order to raise the effectiveness of Russian oil and gas industry against the geopolitical backdrop. Number 4. Under the conditions of limited investment resources, you should have focused on instruments that provide for environmental security, for example, such instrument as state and private partnership. But I must say that the evaluation of the thesis is positive. The thesis complies with the major requirements set forth in the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. It's a graduate research work which is relevant and makes its contribution to the economic science, and the candidate for the degree, Anton Khoroshavin, can be awarded the degree candidate of science in economics. Now the floor is given to Professor Sergeyev.
The topic of the research is relevant. These days, the trend is to call them energy companies. Studies in oil and gas industry are timely and very relevant, and the number of them is increasing as there are still issues to be researched in this area. It's great to see that the candidate has made some progress in this field. Apart from the critical remarks, I'd like to focus on a couple of aspects which originally I wanted to point out as a drawback of your study. I suppose that your research lacked mathematical modeling and mathematical methods of research. But later, when I read the thesis with more attention, I made a conclusion that it's rather an advantage than a disadvantage of your study. Because if you had provided this data, this would have been the insider information, trade secrets, and this would somehow compromise the research. So thank you for not manipulating with the data. What I appreciate about your dissertation is a very deep literature review. It covers all the major trends in the field. So now let me turn to the critical remarks. I have 3 of them and find them critical. So in the first research finding, the candidate speaks about maintaining balance for long-term economic stability, environmental security in the framework of the ecological life cycle from production to the use of hydrocarbons and waste recycling. What I find wrong here is that you do not focus that much on balancing these 2 segments, upstream and downstream. Here I mean exploration and production and refining and sales, which also concerns long-term business development and sustainable development. I touched upon that issue when I was asking my question about mineral reserves. Number 2, when testing the research result, you focused on vertically integrated oil companies, as they are dominating the market in Russia. However, it is of interest to find out what's going on in independent private oil and gas companies. They are working on tough oils and specific areas, geographic conditions, which are of no interest to big oil and gas corporations. Another type of business, and a very special one, is service, oil service industry. You should have covered that, those market players as well. And thirdly, I suppose that the method and the mechanism of corporate management you offer lacks originality, because these methods of scenarios have been in long and wide use by many companies and many market players. So it doesn't seem novel at all that you should advise that, especially when you mention proactive approaches. Maybe you could have come up with something more original. However, these drawbacks do not undermine the general positive impression I got from reading your research. It has some novelty, it's a systematic study, it is relevant, the results seem accurate, and the candidate can be awarded a degree of the candidate of science in economics. The specialization is 080005. Thank you.
I would like to focus on some aspects that have scientific novelty. First of all, I would like to say that the author's opinion about the development of multidimensional approach at a micro level, it is very important because we know that research conducted at a micro level has not been enough in this area. And the candidate for the degree takes into account the comprehensive development of the company, as well as such external aspects as environmental aspects, market forces, and so on. The next thing I would like to focus is that the author pulls foreign and domestic experience and analyzes best practices. He developed recommendations on the development of sustainable business development in oil and gas companies, and these recommendations taken into account environmental indicators. The use of these indicators can encourage sustainable development of oil and gas companies. The last thing I would like to mention is that the author describes the layout and asks the question about the layout. This layout integrates stakeholders, legal requirements, and environmental aspects. Number 4, I would like to say that the author justifies risk-oriented approach to company management. He conducted a very interesting comparative analysis. Here I mean the risk analysis in the companies that he studied. He analyzed types of risks and different processes that lead to risks. I think the recommendations about the assessment of environmental aspects also have scientific novelty. He uses different types of assessments in this area, and this is important because the use of these assessment methods allowed the companies to have an environmental impact. And number 6, I would like to focus and underline the analytical skills of the candidate for the degree. He has analyzed the barriers that the oil and gas companies have, and he has also analyzed different ISO standards, and I believe this analysis is very critical and very well done. However, I would like to speak about some critical remarks as well. The author uses two terms as synonyms. I mean such terms as sustainable business development and corporate sustainability. Number 2, you should have paid more attention to problems and challenges of implementing best available technology and green technology in the area of production, refining and use of hydrocarbons. From the point of view of the technological disadvantages of this area, I think while analyzing the efficiency of sustainable business development, you should have added external monitoring to the internal monitoring. Here I mean steering control, which includes environmental activities. This steering activity is conducted from the point of view of the risk-oriented approach, which includes environmental protection and health protection. Number 4, you recommend the integrated system of sustainable business development, but you do not speak about the departments within the companies that should be responsible for implementing the system, and you do not analyze the human resources that can implement this system. And there is some specific remark. You repeat a part of text on page 131. However, I evaluate the research positively, and the remarks that I have made are due to the complex research object. The author examines oil and gas companies which work in very difficult market conditions. However, the thesis is an independent graduate research work which uses modern theories and methods, and the author has developed recommendations for sustainable business development in oil and gas companies, including specific instruments for sustainable business development. Therefore, the author has achieved the aim he has set up in the introduction. Therefore, the thesis by Anton Khoroshavin complies with the major requirements set forth in order issued on the 1st of September 2016 on the procedure of granting academic degree at St. Petersburg State University. And it is a graduate research work which is devoted to a relevant topic and makes a personal contribution to the economic science. And Anton Khoroshavin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of science. The specialization is 080005, Economics and Management of the National Economy. Now the floor is given to Professor Lukin.
Can you hear me all right? As the report is posted online, I would limit my presentation to some major advantages and some critical remarks and questions that I have. There is no doubt that the study is relevant. I don't have any doubt concerning accuracy and relevance of the research and the research findings. I would like to limit to a number of research findings which I find important to make the final decision on conferring or non-conferring degree. The candidate lays a practical and scientific foundation for the multidimensional approach to corporate sustainability, for long-term economic stability, environmental security, and corporate social responsibility of oil and gas companies in Russia. Khoroshavin summarizes and systematizes Russian and international practices of implementing integrated management systems, industrial security, environmental security, energy efficiency and quality control. This allowed the candidate to analyze how indicators of sustainable business development are used, and he could develop recommendations to make corporate sustainability management in oil and gas companies more effective. The candidate has conducted an in-depth study of international ISO standards and how they are implemented in corporate strategies. These allowed to reveal business strategies which need quality changes when it comes to oil and gas companies in Russia. Another benefit is that the research results provide a better insight into modern evolutionary trends in tools supporting sustainable business development. The candidate has revealed how innovations are implemented in the management of environmental life cycle in oil and gas, from field development to hydrocarbon production and recycling. The candidate has determined possible impact from modernization of production in oil and gas by injecting best available technologies. He has developed recommendations to implement specialized management tools to provide long-term environmental and economic efficiency of Russian oil and gas companies. They were tested in major Russian oil and gas companies such as Rosneft, Gazprom and Lukoil. These are valuable research findings to my mind. At the same time, there are some controversial points. I'd like to focus on them. The candidate has tested environmental, economic indicators for sustainable business development for oil and gas industry in major public vertically integrated oil and gas companies. In my opinion, it would be of interest to test these indicators in major private oil and gas companies and oil and gas companies with lower capitalization. This might require other sources of statistical data. The candidate prefers to use the term sustainable business development to the term corporate sustainability. I fear this might contradict effective legislation of the Russian Federation. In table 1.2, there is no data for the year 2016. That's the table with the data on the dynamics of depreciation of fixed assets. These remarks are not critical. They do not undermine the general positive impression I had from reading that. The dissertation is a complete study. It's independent. It's a systemic study. It uses a variety of theoretic concepts and modern research methods. The tasks, the aims and objectives the candidate set are achieved to the fullest extent. The thesis is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of science in economics. It's a complete graduate research work. The topic is relevant and is indicative of the candidate's personal contribution into the development of the field. The candidate can be conferred the degree in the specialization 080005, Economics and Management of the National Economy. Thank you. I hope you could hear me all right. I would like to thank members of the dissertation board for their recommendations, their critical remarks and their interest. I promise I will consider all of them in further research. I would like to provide answers to some questions and remarks in support of my position. The first question was about the focus on major oil and gas companies in Russia and abroad. When I was choosing these companies, I found it important that they have public reporting. When it comes to private companies, they have lower capitalization and they don't have verified reporting, which we couldn't use in our research. It would create a certain disbalance against major public companies. When concerning service companies and small oil and gas companies, these companies have their peculiarities when implementing sustainable business development tools. This is a topic of further research because that's very different from major companies. Talking about a 5-year plan and testing I conducted in that time span, I chose that period because by that time most companies had already implemented the tools in focus. That's why this period seemed to be the most telling. Talking about the terminology I used, the term corporate sustainability is the term you most often come across in foreign scholarly papers. However, according to Federal Law 5, corporations are legal persons. So if we use this term corporation and corporate sustainability, then it's a wider term which includes wider scope of phenomena. Strategic management and marketing aspects were given in literature review when analyzing sustainable business development tools. I also focused on that in other parts of my dissertation, taking aims and objectives of my study and the scope of my research, and also focusing on the description of my specialization. I didn't focus specifically on these two aspects. They were beyond the scope of my dissertation. Concerning mathematical and economic risk assessment tools, I had obligations with these companies where I tested my developments. These companies face certain risks with management systems that they use, and there was a lot of confidential information. Apart from that, I didn't focus on those indicators due to the different objective of my study. The dissertation didn't aim to consistently analyze risks. Rather, it aimed to analyze practices Russian companies have implemented these tools because they seem rather novel for the Russian market. And based upon that, I aimed to develop recommendations focusing on strong and weak points. Talking about the best available technologies in oil and gas industry, this is another study to conduct, because these technologies and the way they're implemented is a different research topic. And I'd like to thank professors for this kind of remarks. I will consider that in future. Partnerships in oil and gas industry recently mostly focused on environmental issues. Also, there was some partnership as regards fines. You can find relevant bits in my dissertation. Most companies view this area as a potential risk than a possibility and opportunity. Talking about the analysis of Russia's reform of environmental control, there were some changes taking place in the legislation of the Russian Federation, but many of these changes have been inconsistent. Some of the relevant laws were enacted only by December 2017. For this reason, there is not enough evidence from the industry to make any valid conclusions. Talking about companies' departments responsible for sustainable business development, we find it ineffective. We believe that it's an integrated responsibility, and it is advisable to set up an advisory body that will include top managers and also department managers who would communicate these ideas and implement these tools all around the company. I'd like to thank the professor for his comment about the downstream and upstream activities. It's a challenge, and these two aspects need balancing, which we will consider in future studies. Thank you very much for your interest to my dissertation once again. Thank you. We don't have any speakers from the non-members of the board. Now we would like to listen to the report of the academic supervisor. members of the dissertation board, chairman, and attendees. I will not be citing my report. I'd like to say that it's really satisfying to see that the candidate, who is not an economist, managed to focus on rather a complex issue in his dissertation. When he started his postgraduate research, he had already published a lot of papers in the topic of the dissertation. He showed a lot of creativity when writing the dissertation. He gave several really effective lectures and got many positive reviews as a lecturer. When completing his research, he had to show his analytical skills and combine that with a deep analysis of practical data. This in-depth analysis was pinned up by theoretical foundation, which was considerable. He focused on the theory of firm strategic development, the concept of stakeholders and management, theoretical issues of building quality assessment systems, competitive environment analysis, strategic management. This is the scope of issues he focused on when completing the dissertation. The country, Russia, is now facing a transition to the use of brand new tools of corporate management, which means, let me call it the double integration. Now companies are facing the task of combining management tools, quality, environmental management, energy management, industrial security, and other aspects. Companies are only given 3 years to complete this task. And one of the objectives was to analyze the degree of readiness of Russian companies. Will they be able to choose best available practices and technologies? Will they be able to use the best foreign practices as benchmarking? What is of all these aims and objectives were realized practically and theoretically at a high level. I would like to underline that the research findings were reported at 6 international conferences. Khoroshavin participated in the studies conducted by Frederick van den Ployen in one of the labs here at St. Petersburg University. The paper published in the Scopus indexed journal is our joint contribution. Oil and gas is a strategically critical area for Russian economy, and it is important that this transition to the use of new instruments should go smoothly. Any theory is dead if it doesn't aim to work out practical recommendations. It's one of the major advantages of Khoroshavin's research. His recommendations were not just spelled out or reported at seminars. His recommendations will be used by Russia's major oil and gas companies when introducing the new management tools. So allow me to recommend to confer the academic degree to the candidate. So now we're coming to the issue of conferring and non-conferring the academic degree. We kindly ask the non-board members and attendees leave the auditorium. You will be invited.
Now, let's proceed with our agenda. Please switch on the microphone and start the broadcast. So these are the critical moments of the session of the dissertation board. So I put to the vote the issue of conferring the academic degree. I would like to remind you that the decision taken by the academic board is positive. It's more than half of the board members and not fewer than 3 members have voted in favor of the decision. This is in compliance with the appropriate order issued by St. Petersburg State University. I believe that the candidate for the degree should be awarded the degree of the candidate of science. Now, Professor Golubetska, what do you think? I also vote in favor of conferring the degree. Professor Zamyatina, I also think that we should confer the degree. Professor Sergeyev, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. And Professor Lukin, I also vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. So, of the 5 members of the dissertation board, 5 have voted in favor. Nobody has voted no one. Nobody has voted against. So, we confer the academic degree, specialization 080003, Economic and Management of the National Economy. Now I give the floor to the candidate for the degree. First of all, I would like to thank the members of the dissertation board for reading my thesis and for your reports. I would like to thank my research advisor, Professor Pakhomova. She's one of the few people who give so much to her postgraduate students. I haven't met people like her, even in the university. And I would like to thank Professor Shepeleva, with whom I studied the topic when I was at the geographical faculty. And I would like to thank my colleagues and my friends who support me. Thank you. So we finished this session of the dissertation board. Please switch off the broadcast.